And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Up first for flying weather, Monday morning, we've got a band of IFR out here to the west, associated with the area of snow, Nunivak Island, Yukon Delta, right on up, and then narrow band there up along the Arctic coast, and some IFR for the western Alaska range, but an even bigger area here in the Gulf of Alaska up to the North Gulf Coast and into Kodiak Island, and a third area over the Alaska Peninsula from about Nikolsky to Atka, some VFR that could extend up to the Pribilofs, just marginal VFR out to the west there, and not too bad here for the southeast coast. And for the Monday afternoon time frame, we're looking at marginal VFR right along the coastal areas of the Panhandle, but VFR elsewhere there. VFR, Cook Inlet, Matanuska Valley, at least part of the Matanuska Valley, Copper River Basin, VFR, central eastern interior, same thing, VFR, with the IFR and the snow out here to the west. A lot of IFR now covering Kodiak Island right on up into Prince William Sound, and still looking at some IFR up over the Arctic coast, especially on the west side. Big area VFR, St. Lawrence Island, right on down across the Bering Sea here into the central and eastern Aleutians. A little bit more IFR out over the southwest Bering Sea. And then for Tuesday, elongating front here and another system, low pressure area, pushing IFR now into the eastern Aleutians and just north of the remainder of the Aleutian chain there. And still looking at this band here along the west coast all the way down to the Alaska Peninsula. And to the east, though, a lot of VFR through much of interior Alaska, marginal for the portions of the Arctic coast. And now marginal VFR for Prince William Sound, but still some IFR here for the Barren Islands, possibly into southern Cook Inlet, east side of Kodiak Island, otherwise off to the east, marginal VFR becoming VFR into the Panhandle. And then for Tuesday afternoon, marginal VFR forecast for the entire southeast coast, North Gulf Coast with the IFR here from Cape St. Elias into Prince William Sound, down into the Barren Islands, and just a narrow band there on the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. Big area of IFR holding out here, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, down into northwest Bristol Bay, extending all the way up to the western Arctic coast, including St. Lawrence Island. Marginal for the Pribilofs and central western Aleutians, marginal VFR, as well as the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And for the passes for tomorrow, Anaktuvik and Adigan, VFR for both passes up in the Brooks Range. Lake Clark and Merrill, look for IFR. IFR also for rainy and windy, marginal VFR, improving to VFR for Isabel and Mentasta. But Tanita, call it possible marginal VFR, especially on the eastern entrance. And for Portage, IFR, and Chilkoot and White, back to VFR. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet here, kind of coming up into the Kuskokwim Valley there, just almost to the Yukon River. Main area here down over Kodiak Island, northeast Bristol Bay, and along the coast of the Panhandle. At the surface out here, back down south of the eastern Aleutians. And for icing, look for areas of possible considerable moderate rime icing, southern Kenai Peninsula. Isolated moderate area extending here from the Alaska Peninsula. Again, isolated moderate icing possible right up over the western interior, back out to the western Arctic coast, including the Seward Peninsula area. And another zone here showing up along and to the south of the west central Aleutians. From there, looking at the jet stream, kind of an elongated trough here from the northwest Bering Sea to a center just south of the western Alaska Peninsula. And the Pacific jet here just barely getting on the chart there, 70, 75 knots, and pretty light up to the north, and a big area of high pressure here ridging up into northwest Canada. So we have southerly winds at 60 to 70 knots over the western part of the state, turning westerly, and then diving down into the Northwest Territories. 9,000 feet, southeast 50 knots, actually just south of the Gulf of Alaska, and then southerlies 40 to 45 knots here over the western interior. As you get in toward the area of high pressure near Dawson, we've got pretty light winds there, and that extends right on down the southeast coast of that ridge, covering much of western Canada. And out here to the west, another system bringing 50 knot southeast winds into the southwest Bering Sea, pushing in toward the central Aleutians. Those winds even stronger at 3,000 feet. Ahead of the front out there, looking at 65 to 70 knots south to southeast winds, becoming light under high pressure over the eastern Aleutians. A weak low here near the Alaska Peninsula, but northerly winds at about 40 knots there for the St. Lawrence Island area. And then southeast winds, 45 knots over northeast Bristol Bay, coming across Kamishak Bay there, possibly getting the southern Kuskokwim Valley, but a pretty narrow band down in that area. Not too bad, pretty light here, especially over the central and eastern part of the interior, extending right on down the southeast coast. And for turbulence, considerable moderate turbulence, pretty likely tomorrow here for the western North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, possibly Cook Inlet into the Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay area. And just light to isolated moderate here for the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island. And then back to an area of more significant turbulence here for Adak and Atka, westward to Shemya and Attu.